So I want to start by talking about two words. The first word is authenticity. The other word is veracity. And so authenticity um, and veracity are two different things. Veracity means truthfulness. So in the case of John 8:1 through 11, if we're talking about the veracity of that passage, we're asking, is it a true story? Did it really happen? So that's what we're thinking about when we say veracity. The word authenticity, when it is applied to Bible texts, means that this was the story written by John at the same time as the rest of the gospel. Right? So was it written by John at the same time as the rest of the gospel? There are reasons to question the authenticity of this passage, and nearly all scholars, even evangelical ones, even those who are conservative, would agree with that. Would say that we have reasons to believe that John 8:1 through 11 was not written by John and was not written at the same time as the rest of the Gospel of John. So I told you I would give you the reasons we have to believe that. So first of all, as you know, the earliest manuscripts omit it. We have thousands and thousands of um, some fragments to whole Bibles that are very, very old. And the oldest of those don't have this story in them. And then, secondly, the earliest commentaries omit it. So you know what a commentary is. So you see all those books over there, and it is someone, not a Bible writer, right? But it is some scholar expounding on a book of the Bible. It tells you what it says and what it means and all of that. And scholars can disagree on things. That's not the point. The point here is that the early church fathers that were writing commentaries already omit this story. So the earliest books that comment about Scripture, about the Gospel of John, don't include this story in their commentary. And then also, when it starts showing up in the manuscripts, it appears in different places. Some places it appears in different places in John, right? So not in John 8, but in John something else. And also in some of them, it shows up in Luke, and not John at all. The other thing is that it breaks up the narrative of John. And I want to. So I want to give you this. So the narrative begins actually in 753. That's why your ESV Bible likely lumps it with chapter 8 rather than chapter 7. So I'm going to read the last verse of the story before this. They replied, "Are you from Galilee too? Search and see that no prophet rises from Galilee." And then Verse 12, it says, "Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness." This is his response to that. Certainly, this whole, they each went to their own house. Well, Jesus didn't even have a house, right? He's in Jerusalem. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. So, and then early in the morning he went to the temple again. And it makes more sense that we go from no prophet arises from Galilee, and Jesus tells them more. So it breaks up the flow of the narrative. And then also, one of the ways scholars figure out what's written by certain people is because authors have a writing style. You know this, right? In fact, I have people tell me all the time that when they do one of my Bible studies, the questions I've written and the narrative I've put in there, they say they hear my voice in their head. Now, I apologize for that, but it's because I have a certain kind of writing style. And my writing style and my speaking style are very similar. Um, and that's true of most authors. And so the language and the grammar of this story are different from the Gospel of John. There are a number of words that are found in this story that are not found anywhere else. They're found nowhere else in John's writings. But those words are found in the Synoptic Gospels. In fact, it reads much more like a Synoptic Gospel story. So, for example, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made. And over again, we see in John, I believe John wrote John 3:16. For God so loved the world. I just finished today 1 John. Love, 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 love is all over there. And the first one, let me read 1 John 1 to show you that how we can see that his writing style is consistent. Consistency of his writing style. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we looked upon and have touched with our hands, concerning the word of life. The life was made manifest, and we have seen it, and we testify to it, and proclaim to you the eternal life, which is with the Father, and was made manifest to us. That sounds like the Gospel of John, doesn't it? Very, very similar writing style. So the language and grammar, a number of words are found nowhere else in John's writings, but they are found in the Synoptics. And the style is more like the Synoptic Gospels as well. So for all these reasons, I believe that the story is not authentic. It was not written by John. It was not written at the same time as the Gospel of John. But the question is it a true story? Did this really happen? That's the veracity. So let's talk about then the truthfulness of this story. It's a very early story. In fact, the church's first historian, Eusebius, learned the story from Papias, who knew John, who was a contemporary of the disciples who lived during the time of the gospel writers. So this story, therefore, is just as old as the stories in the Gospels. Even though it was written down later, the story was circulating through the church just as early as all the other gospel stories. And it's very typical of the type of stories found in the Synoptic Gospels, found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So why didn't any of the gospel writers write it down? Well, probably it was left out of the canon because of the nature of the story. This is it's a pretty sensational story, isn't it? And so it's probably because of the nature of the story. First of all, Jesus is showing mercy to a woman caught in sin, sexual sin. It's not the kind of thing a rabbi would do, is it? He's not your usual rabbi. And such a thing was unheard of in the church of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. So the story probably made church leaders uncomfortable. We're just finishing up with seniors a lesson. When I say lesson, think unit. This one's been about 2.5 weeks. Again. And we're talking about healthy relationships. And I'm really honest with them. We talk about friendships, we talk about dating relationships, we talk about marriage. And I'm very frank with them. It's not the kind of things that I would tell to Megan. And it would make, and it probably does make them uncomfortable at times. But that's probably why it was left out, because it wasn't the kind of story that they wanted out there necessarily. So to sum up on this part of what we're talking about, I believe that this is a true story that somehow got misplaced in John. And I also believe that we can learn much from this story. So we will therefore study and apply it just as we have all the other stories in John's Gospel. So let's talk about the story. They each went to their own house, but Jesus went again to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribe, by the way, teachers sat. That was just normal. All the people came to him, and he sat down to teach and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and was placing her in the midst. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they may bring a charge against him. So she was caught in the act of adultery. And that is a legal claim because that is against Jewish law. Now, let's talk about lawsuits then. Let's talk about the legal system of that time. So obviously, in any courtroom, you need to have evidence, right? And this is a courtroom, this with Jesus being the judge. So you have to have evidence. In Jewish law, the evidence, you had to have at least 2 witnesses who saw the actual act at the same time and place, but did not participate in it. So I can't, if in Jewish law, probably in Cornerstone law too, I can't punch Erin, have her punch me back, and go tell Mr. Hood, "Erin punched me." I punched her first. So you couldn't have been part of what was going on. So at least 2 witnesses who saw it happen, eyewitnesses, is what we call those, but did not participate in it. And that last part is really important as we go. For this to be true, in this case, they would have had to set a trap for the woman. They would have had to set up this situation. here's the thing, and I believe they did. They didn't just happen upon this act. Um, because that's a private thing, right? They didn't just happen upon somebody, two people. Years and years ago, when I was in high school, my dad's favorite. We were living in Europe. My dad's favorite city was Amsterdam, and he and my mom and my sisters, and some of my sisters, my younger sisters, went to Amsterdam many, many, many times. I only went once. But here's a story about one of those times he went. There is a church in Amsterdam that is built out of the attics of these row houses, like they're all connected to each other, consecutive row houses, and it's beautiful. It's called Our Lady in the Attic, and it was a Catholic um, church that met there because Catholicism was outlawed in Netherlands at that time, and they were being persecuted for worshiping. So they made a secret church, and my father loved this church, and it was a place that he would go to commune with God. We're not Catholic, and he was never Catholic, but it's this beautiful place, and just the meaning of it and the antiquity of it was just so meaningful to him. Unfortunately, it's in the red light district. Y'all know what the red light district is? It's where the prostitutes are. It's where the drug dealers are. So he's in the red light district. Now, please remember that he is, at this point, the deputy chairman of the NATO Military Committee. He is the highest ranking military official, American military official in NATO. He's a 3-star general. One of his fellow members of that he knew from NATO, I don't know if that was a member of the NATO Military Committee or not, finds him there. All right, what you doing here? I'm looking for a church. He's having trouble finding it. And he's like, yeah, right, you're looking for a church. My father was so embarrassed, but he really was looking for a church. This isn't something that you just stumble on. This is something you go to intentionally. And the vast majority of men that are in the red light district in Amsterdam are there for a reason. This isn't happenstance. They knew what was happening. They set her up. They wanted to use her for their own power play against Jesus. They cared nothing about her or justice. And can I just say, where's the guy? Where's the guy? Why wasn't that he's committing adultery too, right? They didn't bring him before Jesus. As D.A. Carson says, adultery is not a sin that one commits in splendid isolation. It takes two. But the man, especially in a sexist society, was not their concern. They could have brought her privately to Jesus. But again, that wouldn't fit their agenda. And Jesus knows exactly what they're doing. They are trying to trap him. If he refuses to uphold the Mosaic law, he's a lawbreaker, and they can charge him with that. Good, we can charge him, because if he refuses to uphold the Mosaic law, we can put him in prison. If he doesn't uphold the Mosaic law, if he upholds the Mosaic law, not only will he basically be signing this woman's death warrant, he would have been supporting a practice of stoning that was not very popular in this at this time. Yes. So therefore, Jesus' popularity and ministry would suffer. How could he do that? So either way, the Jewish leaders thought they had him caught in a trap. Or did they? Here's Jesus' response. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. So this is Jesus' response, and the question that is first asked by everybody is, what is he writing? I don't think it matters that much, but there are different people that say different things. So tradition says that he was writing a verse, possibly Jeremiah 17:13, that says, those who turn away from you, from God, will be written in the dust. They will be forgotten, blown away like dust. And then that continues, because they have forsaken the Lord, the spring of living water. Maybe it was another verse. Maybe he was writing the accuser's sins or the names of those who had also committed adultery. Some say he was just doodling to buy time, for tempers to cool down. Some say he was averting his eyes from the woman who was possibly naked or close to it. The truth is, we just don't know. But we do know what he said. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone. So, what does this mean? Here's what it doesn't mean. Here's what it can't mean. It does not mean that they have to be sinless, or the law would be pointless. Nobody could be a judge. We're all dirty, rotten sinners deserving hell, and so it can't mean that. In a stoning, the witnesses were the first were to throw the first stone. Those who saw it threw the first stone. In this case, it's the dudes that set her up. So here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying any of those people who brought her to Jesus, who are guiltless in this situation and have not also committed adultery, those are the only people who are qualified to participate in this stoning.
What about the other ones who saw it? Have they committed adultery?
Probably. Maybe. I don't know. But they certainly weren't guiltless because they set the woman up. They set a trap. So Jesus cut the quick of their consciences with this statement because Jesus knew that they were in fact guilty of setting this woman up, of using and abusing her, and likely of adultery. Maybe even with this woman, they may have been the people that had sex with her. So one by one, they walk away until Jesus is left alone. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Now, make no mistake about it, the woman is guilty. But Jesus showers mercy on her, and I believe her life was forever changed. I wish there was a where they are now. You know, at the end of movies, when it's about real people, they tell you, like, basketball players know that I'm a big, remember the Titans. And at the end, they tell you where everybody, where everybody is now. I would love a where is she now? But I believe her life was changed. This is what Gary Burge says about this. The crisp ending captures the seriousness with which Jesus views sin and judgment, even the sin of those who accuse the woman, and his gracious, forgiving outlook on those who are caught in this grace and truth. So Jesus is not treating sin lightly here. In fact, he is forgiving her sin while calling her to obedience. G.L. Borchard is a scholar. He says this: sin is not treated lightly by Jesus, but sinners were offered opportunity to start a new life. So it's the same offer he makes to us. And I believe we are to see ourselves in this woman. It's easier for some of us than others. But if we don't see ourselves in this woman, sinners, forgiven by grace, then I think our hearts have probably grown hard concerning our own sinfulness. So I want to take just a couple minutes, and that's all we have, to apply this. Here's the deal. Sin is sin. Sin is sin. I'm not sure we always believe that. I've never killed anyone. That's really bad. I've lied. That's not as bad. But apart from Christ, all sin, any sin, separates us from God. I'm not an adulteress, but my sin put Jesus on that cross just as much as anything that woman ever did. So in the book of Hosea, God tells Hosea to do something really weird. He says, go find a prostitute in the marketplace and marry her. Go marry a whore, is what he said. And I'm sure that Hosea was. So he goes and he gets Gomer. And he takes Gomer home and he cleans her up and he loves her and he takes care of her. And she runs back to her life. And he goes back for her again. And she goes back to that. It's a picture. It's an acted out prophecy, which God did a number of times in the Old Testament. So here's what you need to understand. This is the point of the story of Hosea. All sin is whoredom against God. My sin is whoredom against God. Do we believe that? I'm not sure we do. And I would suggest if we don't, we are in danger of distorting what Christ has done. Christ's forgiveness in each of our lives diminishes as we lose touch with the depth of our own sinfulness. When we no longer see ourselves in the drama of the woman, when we feel we are free from accusation and judgment, give me just a second. We lose sight of God's grace. Jesus is not simply committed to the requirements of the law, but to the care and transformation of the woman before him. And every person who likewise brings a debt of sin into the circle where he sits. I am an adulterous woman. We are all adulterous men and women. And I have in my sin committed adultery against God and been unfaithful to him. And so have you. And Christ offers us forgiveness instead of condemnation. May we never use God's mercy to excuse our sin, but rather may we, by the power of the Holy Spirit He gives us, leave our lives. Amen. Amen. Thank you. Let me see it.
That is